Kadosh, Moker Or, Bekiim Bahalacha 3, day 83, page 180, Siman Yudchet. We are on Halacha Yod. We're talking about Stinim Usmichot. We're talking about sheets and blankets. Blankets are exempt from Tzitzit, even though they are four-cornered, since blankets are made for nighttime use. Even though, what? That's what we spoke about. It's nighttime use, so you're not obligated. So even though people sometimes remain covered with the blankets during the first part of the morning, there's no obligation. So, Mimanashach, according to everybody, you're not going to need a beracha, and you're not going to need tzitzit, whether it's because of the rosh, because it's a nighttime clothing, right? And according to the Rambam, it's a nighttime in itself. Nevertheless, if someone has a woolen blanket, right, and he rounds one of its corners to ensure that it cannot possibly be obligated, he will receive a special blessing. Meaning, if you come and you actually mamash cut it to become round, so it's not a four-corner garment, then it becomes even better. Okay, number 240. Okay, the Rambam and the Rosh. You remember we keep on bringing down the Rambam and the Rosh. The Rosh comes and he writes, bed sheets are exempt from tzitzit, even though people sometimes remain covered in the morning, since their main use is during the nighttime. So it's a nighttime clothing. The Tur repeated this. This fits in the Rosh's ruling about nighttime garments are always going to be exempt, even when they're used during the daytime. As explained as a preface to this Siman. Bed sheets and blankets are not to be considered garments that are used both during the day during the nighttime, but it's always used during the nighttime. Okay? Rambam's ruling, however, is that it depends only on when the garment is going to be worn. A daytime garment was going to be exempt from tzitzit during the nighttime. A nighttime garment is going to be obligated during the daytime. According to this, it would be that the bed sheets, right, would be, if they're used during the day, they wouldn't need it. Indeed, Maran actually brought down that according to the bed sheets are used during the morning, there's no obligation to attach, there is an obligation to attach tzitzit to them, right? And this is likewise the ruling of the Sefer Yereim. Maran countered the common custom not to bother to attach tzitzit to bed sheets. He says, therefore, he ruled in Shulchan Aruch that they are not obligated whatsoever. So why are blankets exempt exactly? So since Maran asserted in the Bet Yosef, the Rambam's interpretation of the halacha is paramount, it seems difficult to understand. So why do we not attach tzitzit to blankets? If right now you're going to use it during the daytime, it's going to be a problem. So the Magen Avraham explained that it's based upon the ruling of the Mordechai. After setting the Sifri, and that the Torah obligates us to attach tzitzit to your garment, but not to your bedding. He explained that the Torah demands tzitzit on garments that are actually used as wearers that wrap themselves. Bed sheets, they just cover the person. They don't wrap themselves. The person in bed is not considered being wearing the bed sheet, right? Or the blanket covering. It's just covering him. It's like on top, right? Okay, so it could be that he's going to smuggle up, but it means that it's not a wearing of it. Okay? If the Rambam agrees with this, then he would likewise rule that if the bed sheets are exempt from the mitzvah tzitzit, even when used during the day. However, the Magen Avraham pointed out that the Tosfot ruled that a cloth used to cover a person is the same as the garment that a person wears, and both are obligated to have tzitzit attached. In fact, he ruled that even a bottom sheet needs to have the tzitzit attached, and certainly one needs to have it, right? And certainly one needs to cover the person. Therefore, there's a rule to be stringent in this matter. The Rabbi testified that he found the handwriting gloss explaining that if a garment's initial use is for nighttime, the garment is exempt from the tzitzit, even if the person continues wearing it during the morning, and it's still considered a nighttime garment, right? And you don't need to, even according to the Rambam, since it was put on during the nighttime, to be worn during the nighttime. Meaning that, okay, even if it goes during the daytime and they're still sleeping, but the cut of the usage is during the nighttime. Fine. In practice, Magen Avraham comes and he ruled that the practice one should cut off one of the four corners to make a round. In this way, you made the sheet or the blanket exempt. Okay, the Magen Avraham says that this stringency only applies to woolen sheet or blanket, only to wool, but not to one made out of any other textile, even linen. This distinction, the previously explained, is according to the Maran, the garments are the other ones which are not mina Torah, and therefore even if they're obligated by the Torah, it could be the halacha falls like the Rosh, right, or of the Mordechai exempted bed sheets. Although the sages instituted a rule obligating garments of L textiles, we still have a basis of leniency, meaning that only when it's going to be wool do you have to be machmir. So if you have a wool blanket, so then, you have this stringency. Maran, however, testified. Which one? But even with that, it's still better to come and to make one round, one of the four corners round. Again, only wool. Anything else you don't need to. Only wool. So Maran, however, testified that the common custom is not to attach to any bed sheets or blankets, even those made out of wool or linen. Right, and the no poskim complained this is incorrect. Apparently, the custom assumes that the Rambam agreed with the Mordechai regarding sheets or blankets, and therefore you don't need to do anything. Okay, there's a svek seika to be lenient. Does Maran agree that one should rely upon the svek seika where the problem could be avoided without too much bother or expense? So the Shon Tzion demonstrated that according to Maran, one may rely upon a svek seika even when it's possible to determine one of the doubts. Likewise, in the Rabbi Elmaleh, he demonstrated that according to Maran, one may rely upon the svek seika even when the issue is one that will become resolved automatically with a reasonable amount of time. And nevertheless, we have no direct proof for a case where the problem can be resolved by just coming and just cutting a corner. So perhaps this case can be compared to a ruling in response to Rabbi Omer, the one may rely upon safek rabbanan lekula, even if the issue can be avoided without undue hardship. So let's look in the Chazon Odia, and one might argue that according to the Ben Ish Chai, he considered a simple thing just to round the corner of the blankets. It's not all right. It's not all minor thing in today's world. Right nowadays, people are raised to have everything just to do it. If the housewife would be asked to make her linens and blankets symmetrical, she's likely to protest loudly. Therefore, he just says it's not considered to be a major inconvenience, right? That's going to come and justify this lenient opinion. Actually, we have a few bases. Number one, right? Perhaps halacha follows the Rosh. Number two, the Mordechai's argument is correct. Number three, the Rabbah's argument is correct. So since Maran testified the common custom to be lenient, so therefore we could be lenient. Supporting the Mordechai wrote the norm follows the stringency of the Magen Avraham, meaning that nowadays nobody comes and is going to start cutting right one of the corners. What about quilt covers? There's no basis to round the corners of quilt cover, since the cover is not considered a garment whatsoever. It is simply just to cover the quilt, which is inside of it. So that for sure there's no problem. Down comforters, right? He says Halacha Brura suggests a basis for leniency for down comforters, since the principal part of this is the filling. He says the cloth cover is simply a mean of holding the down together. So he says, although one could argue whether or not this is true, he says, right, you could be lenient. So he says that the corners of a comforter are not well defined, and therefore, anyway, it's going to be okay. What about synthetic textiles? Sheets and blankets made of synthetic textiles have an additional basis for leniency because it could be that they're bichlal, that it's exempt of tzitzit bichlal altogether. Fine. Halacha Yud Aleph. Okay. People often use woolen throw blankets or an afghan to wrap up for extra warmth while sitting at home during the day. Therefore, one should make sure to at least round one of these corners, and this stringency is recommended, even for such blankets made of other textiles. Meaning, this is not something which is your blankets at nighttime. This is something during the daytime. So if it's during the daytime, here you don't have as many leniencies anymore, because here you have a problem. So therefore, he comes and he says you should round one of them. So let's see now, 241. If someone has a blanket that he generally uses to cover himself during the day, so he says even the Rabbeinu Asher would agree that it is obligated to have tzitzit attached. The basis for leniency forwarded by the Rabbi does not apply in this case either, since the blanket is used for midday relaxation. It's not used for nighttime. The only leniency is the Mordechai. Therefore, if the blanket is made of the wool and therefore it might be obligated by the Torah, we are obligated to be stringent because of If it's made out of the textiles, you can be lenient. But the Ben Ish Chai rule that one should not rely upon this leniency and therefore make around one of these corners. It's mentioned in the previous footnote. It appears from the ruling of Maran Tzion that one may be lenient in such a case. The Dinim and go to the Chazon Ish also testified that he made sure to be round one of these blankets to be used during the daytime. The response also, Yitrudu b'tshuva, also likewise rules stringently that this is what you want to do. So therefore, if you keep a bed in his office and he uses it for daytime naps, he must make sure that the round corners on any woolen blankets are going to be used. The same applies to high school yeshiva students when they take daytime. So anybody that takes siestas, bekitzur. Anybody that takes siestas, you have a problem. Why? Because if it's going to be wool, so therefore you should be stringent. Okay? Halakha number 12. There's a strong basis for leniency to use bottom sheets without rounding any of the corners, even if they're made of wool. So here, usually they're not made of wool. If not, you would just be sweating away. But, right, technically speaking, right, he says over here, there's going to be a strong leniency for leniency for the bottom ones, right? Even if they're made of the wool. So 242, the bottom sheets are not used to cover the body at all. They're just simply spread underneath the person, which is to sit or lay on the bed. So Mishabura say that according to some poskim, such an item is considered a garment is obligated to tzitzit. The Chazon Ish argued and he said that that all poskim agreed that such a sheet is exempt from tzitzit. The opposite of Mishabura. The Tosafot upon which Mishabura based upon his assumption, right? He says meant only that if someone spreads a regular garment beneath him instead of wrapping himself as people usually do. But that's something different. Here, it's made that way that it's supposed to be beneath you. So therefore, there's no problem. Okay, number 13, a barber cape is exempt from having tzitzit attached, as explained above in 10:13. Okay, and Bezat Hashem, we continue tomorrow.